commons, the finance, the trust, as key enablers, not only to implement the pact at the local level, but to transform the international power landscape.
So a shared vulnerability, a shared opportunity to take risks is one way, as Emilia said, to rebuild those relationships and take down some of those power dynamics.
Question again the basics of economy and finance.
And I think that's the real shift that I've seen in the last 10 years. We didn't have a discourse that was dealing about caring, sharing, solidarity, feminist politics.
There will be no human rights or social justice. There will be no right to the city or democracy without the commons.
We're talking about changing the power of me to the power of we.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Fatima Fernandez, and I am very pleased to welcome you all to the first session of the Future Envisioning exercises. The Future Envisioning exercises, mandated by the UCLG Policy Councils, are mechanisms to unfold the Pact for the Future. They are a space of dialogue and co-creation in which the UCLG political leadership, together with our organized civil society and partners articulated in the UCLG town halls, will build bridges to unfold the pact. The conclusions reached in these discussions will inform the deliberations of UCLG statutory bodies and our contributions to the UN General Assembly's review of the 2030 Agenda at the SDG Summit, as well as to the Summit of the Future, building on the Secretary General's Our Common Agenda. So during this session and in the coming days, we will try to define, explore, and discuss how the notion and implementation today of the commons and in the coming days of the rest of the entry points can help to deliver on the transformation and commitments contained in the Pact for the Future and in the Common Agenda. To this end, the first segment of this session will start with an exploratory consultation on what we mean by the commons and its relations to the right to the city, followed by a global reflection on the commons and its application at the territorial level. This will be followed by a series of concrete contributions from policy councillors, town halls, and stakeholders on their visions on the commons. And we will also focus on processes that are relevant to this community and that will be brought here by different partners. After that, we will move on into the Agora, the open dialogue space that is at the heart of this process. So without further ado, I thank you again all for your participation, and I am very pleased to give the floor to our Secretary General, Emilia Saiz, to kick off the session. So Emilia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Welcome, everyone. It's really good to see you all joining for this discussion. As Fatima was explaining, the Future Envisioning exercises are not one single discussion. They are not as a standalone experience. They are part of a policy-making mechanism that our World Organization, United Cities and local governments has been deploying. And we have been doing that not only with our membership, not only with local and regional government elected leadership, but also with our partners in civil society, and with our partners elsewhere in the academia and other stakeholders. And all of these stakeholders, all of these different parts of our ecosystem are going to be thinking with us. But above all, we would like the Future Envisioning exercises to scenify the convergence of the policy councils and the town hall processes that have been shaping our policies over the past, I would say, over the past 4 years. What do we want to do today? We are inviting you, after having been very active parts, all of you have been shaping our Pact for the Future, our strategic visions. We want to invite you to reflect with us on the next steps that we need to undertake to unpack this pact for the future, to make it tangible, to make it happen at local and regional level, but also to make it into a real global agenda of our world organization. As you know, the Pact for the Future is a global commitment, is a commitment for hope, for this generation and future generations, that touches upon the aspirations of our membership, local and regional governments, but that goes beyond the mandates of local and regional governments, and it tries to embody a vision, a joint vision of the world, where big shifts in systemic changes need to happen at different levels. At the level of intergenerational relations and the way we relate to each other, we care for each other, the people, but also the way we relate to the planet and the way we manage ourselves, we govern ourselves. And in order to do this, the big connectors with the many crises that the world is facing, and the big articulators of transformation have been identified by our discussions together around the commons. What are the commons nowadays? What place do they need to take in policy? Economy, how do we finance equality? Trust, how do we regain trust in each other, respect for institutions? How do we serve a true accountability and freedoms and human rights? And governance, what kind of governance and relations between spheres of governments do we need? Are the valid spheres of governments that we are working on today still relevant for the governance of tomorrow? Today, we are going to be paying attention to the commons. And on the commons, just 3 thoughts before we start with the exercise on your views about it. But the way that we have been working around the commons is commons are not always public. The definition of commons does not relate to what is public and is private, but it has to do with how we co-create those commons, the role of communities, and the place that we want to give to the commons and the new essentials in our policy making, and in particular, in the case of our constituency, in service provision. If we want to define new essentials and we want to acknowledge some of the basic needs as commons that we need to take care of and manage together, we will need to change the way that we govern, the way that we finance, but also some of the things that we understand as commons today. And we are not starting this discussion because we have had it, but we want this discussion to actually lead us to concrete recommendations around policies and commitments that both the World Organization will need to undertake, but that also our membership will need to commit to in order to transform this and to place the commons as a crucial ground to foster the caring society that is articulated in the Pact for the Future. So this is the background of the discussions. As I said, it's not an initial discussion, it's also not the end. We are now coming to try and concretize what kind of policies do we need to commit to and do we need to promote to make that transformation policy. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear from you on what do you consider, what does this commons idea inspire? We want to start with this exercise, and my colleague Ainara is going to support me with that, with a Mentimeter exercise. We're going to be asking you several questions. Be as bold as you want in those responses. You don't need to be politically correct. Say what you really mean here. And from there on, we will be starting the discussions. Ainara, the floor is yours to present the Mentimeter exercise.
Thank you very much, Emilia, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this Future Envisioning exercise. So, as Emilia said, the idea of this consultation exercise is to co-construct a shared common understanding that can serve us as a departure point for the Future Envisioning exercise. So I'm now going to ask you to please go to menti.com on your phones and enter the code 22263827. My colleagues have also just pasted this code on the chat. Okay, so are you ready? Let's get started. You're gonna have to be ready because we're gonna be moving quite fast, okay? So the first question that we're gonna ask you is, what word comes to your mind when you think about commons? And you can enter up to 3 different words. And in fact, we can already see some of the first responses popping up. We can see collectivity, we can see public, we can see shared. I think that these notions are actually quite related to what you were hinting at before, Emilia. What do you think?
Sorry. Yes, exactly. It is about, when we talk about this, the perception is always about this confrontation between public and private. But I think in the discussions that we have been having towards the Congress, we have managed to expand this notion. And we have come also to discover that many things that we consider very public are not, and many things that we consider private are also not. But also things that are in between are part of our common legacy. So I really love what is coming up here: community, sharing, collective, and this goes really very, very much hand in hand with the claims of our Pact for the Future, which is about shifting this notion of action toward collective action and transformation based on the capacity of co-creation. It calls us also to redefine what communities are and how we can participate in communities. So I don't know about you, Ainara, but I think we have a very good group here. Maybe we are preaching, we are preaching to the choir only.
Maybe yes, but I would say that we also have some very provoking notions being entered by the participants. So I think that this provides quite a solid basis to start our exercise. And now I would invite you to go to the second question, and we're going to do the opposite exercise, the complementary exercise. I'm going to ask you to identify what words come to your mind when you think about the opposite of the commons. And again, you can enter up to 3 different words. And let's see what we get with this one. This is an interesting question. Okay, that was...
Well, that's quite clear what we were saying about public, private, indeed. But monopolization, for instance, is something interesting, very concrete. Eviction. I mean, who has the right to define where we are? And certainly in the case of housing, which we certainly defend as an important common, is extremely relevant. I think you can also start to sense how our public and how the almost 100 participants in this discussion are occupying their day-to-day. So you can sense we have a lot of housing colleagues as well that are here. But I really like things as individual and exclusion coming in. Let's go to the next, to the last one.
Yes, let's go to the last question, which is related to how does the framing of the right to the city help us, this framework, how can it contribute to addressing the commons, to propelling the commons, promoting the commons? And there you can see that you have different dimensions of the framework of the right to the city. And we're asking you to select the 3 ones that you think are the most helpful or the most directly related to propelling the commons, fostering the commons, protecting the commons. And we can see, Emilia, that in this case, I was going to say that things were not as clear as when we saw private coming up very strongly on our screens, but they are quite clear. What do you think?
I have difficulties reading what number, so maybe if you can help me a bit there, Ainara, because I cannot see so well in my screen, sorry.
Yes, absolutely. So as of now, Participants seem to believe that the dimension of the right to the city framework that is most relevant to addressing the commons is that of equity in the use of public spaces and services, followed by the notion of inclusive citizenship and activating the social functions of property. I think that this links very well to the previous two questions, and it gives us
and also to the kind of transformative shift that we feel local and regional governments can play. Because if this ecosystem believes that equity in the use of quality and safer public spaces and services is the key articulator for this right to the city, these are areas where our membership and our partners have a very big role to play. So I think this is really good. But certainly I also feel that non-discrimination and gender equality, but also inclusive citizenship are very relevant roles. And I see inclusive citizenship is there up next to the issue of equality. So thank you very much, everyone, for these inputs. Don't hesitate to share ideas also through the chat. Pay attention to the chat, because our colleagues are feeding that chat with links and all relevant issues. And allow me now to go immediately to Aromar Revi. I invite you, Aromar, to give us a bit of an inspirational pitch on the transformative power of the commons for a sustainable future. You have been working with us as our Ubuntu advisor for quite a while. We work together on advocating for SDG 11 to be included in the agenda. We insisted for certain parts of these discussions also to be further developed as we work towards the new urban agenda. And most recently, we have been talking not only within the framework of the Pact for the Future, but also around the role of water and the economy of water. So I think you are very well placed to give us some ideas. I am very pleased to have you with us. Thank you, Aromar. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Amelia. That was a very interesting Mentimeter, poll that we just saw just now. I guess not unexpected in some ways. Starting with the commons as something that's held together, expanding to the sort of antonym of commons, which is privatization versus public. But I think, my first comment, and we know that from being in the UN not so long ago, is that the Pact for the Future, in some senses, is a little bit of, let's say, there might be some minor jealousies of between some of the actors in that space vis-a-vis local and regional governments, in some senses of actually, taking or stolen the thunder from what might happen in 2024. And I'm speaking very concretely about our common agenda and the Pact for the Future. So, I think we've made a lot of progress on this, especially the discussion and the engagement and the co-creation that has happened. But there may be a few provocations that might be useful for us to think about it, because I think it's not only the question of the public or the private, it becomes polarized into that, or the state versus the market. I think we have to go a little bit deeper. And if you want to embrace the caring, sharing, and sort of the new feminist framing that we have of trying to look at what's happening in the world, both polycrisis and the opportunities we've seen cities and regions bringing together, there may be a few things to think about. And I would say the first thing to think about is the most important resource that humanity has in the 21st century. And, this should have been a Mentimeter question in some senses, but I lay out what I think might be, one way of looking at it. We will have in mid-century somewhere between 8 and 10 billion people alive, right? So, if you take the average of that over a century, and you just take 10 for a simple thing as far as that's concerned, that means 1 trillion person years is the total amount of lives that exist in the century. That's actually much more than any of the people that have ever lived before. So in that sense, that is a huge opportunity of the century. So to my mind, or let's say the first provocation is, in some senses, the most important common resource that we have as humanity is actually time. It isn't property, it isn't money, it isn't wealth, it's time. And I think it's a colonization of that time in lots of different ways. That is really, that constitutes the deep underlying process that we have. And I think it's, this might be an interesting way for us in local and regional governments to sort of reclaim processes, even if it's a small sliver of that, saying of the time that you have in the year, how much of the time can you as an individual, as a collective, as a community or a city actually put back into looking at the common good, right? Whether it's the common good in terms of your location, your locality, your territory, or in some senses the natural environment, just that, limited contribution of tithe, it might be 2%, it might be 3% or 4%. That's an easy thing for us to do. That might be a very interesting campaign for us to put together, saying, we have the time, we can put that time into competition, we can put that time into doing a whole range of things that are not very useful, or we can put that time into the caring, sharing, and sort of reimagination and the reaction as far as that's concerned. So I would say time is a very critical element, and this is a very interesting way to be able to reclaim that space. The second thing is, the reason why this becomes very complicated, because the public and the private gets conflated with how markets work, that becomes ideological, etc., is around the question of let's say property, right? And I think the utility of using the right to the city is that you don't tie things down to property, whether it's property in terms of land or property in terms of natural resources, or property which we no longer politically correct, but 200 years ago was real, which is people, slavery. Fine. So these are all forms of property that we've constructed, and we've constructed both the state and the firm around those ideas of property, is to try and sort of unpick that and look not necessarily at land, but look at place. Fine. So place is also a common, and place is not only a commons in the physical world, place is a commons in culture, in knowledge, and in mind. And whenever you see a transformation happening, let's say a revolutionary movement or other processes that say, it is reconstructing and reorganizing our idea of place. It's either the location of people in place, that's where the original idea of revolution comes from, the idea that, the whole of the universe revolved around the earth, which we discovered to be somewhat confused in some cases. There was a long battle for that. It's about the relocation of where we are and how we are placed, both in history and culture and in the current point of time. So I think the right to the city gives us the ability to question the idea of place, and again, the colonization of place by particular sets of people and processes and things, right? And we know what's happened in the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was, in some parts of the world at least, especially in the UK, about the colonization and the holding of places that were common, and then, the sort of making sure that people who had access to the commons then had to move into other kinds of things. So I would say the first thing is time, and we can contribute to that. The second thing is that if we have a much more generous idea of place, or we can capture place, both in the abstract, in the imagined spaces, and bring that back into reality. That's the second thing that might be useful. This is a little bit different from the way we normally think. The third thing, which is pretty obvious, and we were all, many of us, Amelia at least, was very much part of this process in New York about a month and a half ago, when we were trying to reclaim a very critical space in the global agenda around water. Fine. So what is looked at as natural resources, then looks at environment, actually is a set of global commons without which life cannot exist. And if life cannot exist, neither society nor economies or anything else that we're talking about cannot exist. And we're threatening that in some significant ways. So there are interesting new movements in this, even within the international system, that you find. I mean, the fact that we now have a Treaty of the High Seas, fine. This is a big step. It's taken 17 years for it to come. It's come from UNCLOS. There's an agreement that, in spite of this conflicted time within the intergovernmental system, all the countries of the world have come together and agreed on some basic principles. And one of the core principles is, like spaces, like Antarctica currently is, it may not remain that way, the high seas is actually a global commons, fine? Which basically means you may be a landlocked country, or you may be, wherever it is, but you notionally should have access to the wonderful things that can come to us from the high seas. It could maybe biodiversity, it may be a new form of medicine, and there's an entire regime that has been agreed around that. So I think there are interesting opportunities here. And of course, we know the long battles that have happened for 30 years in all the big conventions. the atmosphere of the commons, which is a big fight as far as climate is concerned, the rest of the seas, not the high seas, but the other seas that are there in the convention around oceans, deserts, etc. So the environmental question, as people call it, or the question of how one deals with the planet as a commons, is a very critical question. And tied to that is something for which we do have, I think some progress, but not enough connection between the local and regional government community. And that is, now that we have some agreement on biodiversity, this is an interesting, important question for us. It's not so obvious what the connections are, but basically between now and the end of the century, we are entirely capable of, destroying 500 million or maybe more than that, 1 billion years of evolution, because this is the time of, the great, in some senses, extinction. This is the first anthropocentric extinction that's there. So I think we need to look at the connection between life, and that's what biodiversity represents, the resources that enable life, which are, of course, land and water, the atmosphere. So that's one set of things that are there. And of course, the question of how the built environment and how human societies and communities kind of relate to that. Because in this century, given the interconnections that we're seeing between all of these processes and the experience of COVID, which shows us, in some sense, the beginning of the polycrisis, it seems very difficult for us to be able to address these challenges by dealing with them in a piecemeal manner, number one, by trying to make sure that, you take them as one particular system, you colonize them or you circumscribe them, you actually, allow certain sets of people or communities or forms of institutions to take over those processes. And then, you use a whole range of systems of either trade or, of exchange, or let's say of markets, to try and decide what is more important. Because what's very clear to us, at least at the global scale, is you cannot address these questions without an integrated response, which means you need to act simultaneously in all processes. And the only way to act simultaneously in all these processes, as far as we've understood it from the governance point of view, is solidarity. It is actually bringing together a whole range of different interests, some people who might be seeming as if they're going to win, but in the long run they could lose, though others who are actually losing dramatically at the current point of time, to bring them into conversation around some of these core questions. And the impediments to that are fairly simple. The Westphalian idea of the state as a circumscribed space, which is actually centralized and can be organized, is in some senses a big challenge to this new way of thinking. And I think that's an interesting dialogue. It may seem heretical within an intergovernmental system, but I think it's something that we have to talk about. The second thing is the idea of frontiers that are not governed at all. One is the environment. The second, of course, is financial systems. In both of these areas, there is no framework of governance that governs for the common good, either for the common good of the environment, of water, of the atmosphere, of all the common resources that we share together, including land, and at the other end, of the financial resources, which, to close the argument, what is finance in some senses? Finance comes from human labor. What is human labor? Human labor is basically the summation of all the lives that have existed in the past before and the lives that are at present point in time. It comes from labor. I'm not going into Marx and all the other kind of stuff in that space, but basically the economy and the financial system that sits on top of it is deeply exclusionary, number one, and number two, it has no system of governance which acts in the common good. It only acts in the interests of particular sets of people, and we know the evidence very clearly. Inequality has dramatically increased over time, and the current system is running away with itself because we are unable to deal with that, both in the practical sphere and also in the conceptual space. So I'll stop there. I hope I've not taken too much time and given you lots of uninteresting things to think about.
Well, thank you very much, Aroma. A big applause to you. I think if anybody needed inspiration and framing, I think we got it with your remarks. Thank you very much also for bringing the notion of what the United Nations understands as commons. The high seas is one, the atmosphere, Antarctica, and outer space. That is what the United Nations understands as global commons. And what we are trying to do is to make the link between global commons and our local reality. So actually widening the kinds of policies that we need to look at. And from our perspective, we need to also consider global commons, things like housing, food, public space, culture, the internet, but also economy. I really also celebrate you bringing notions like time, because time is something that during the pandemic, our membership identified as a new essential that would also need to help us redefine local service provision. So I think we've got all the ingredients here, and we're going now with the case. And I am very, very happy to have with us the governor of Valparaíso. Gobernador, es un gusto tenerle con nosotros. Rodrigo Mundaca estuvo con nosotros en esa importante semana en la ONU, la semana del agua, en la conferencia del agua, y le hemos invitado hoy, gobernador, porque creemos que es importante enlazar esas nociones importantes, conceptuales sobre la comunización y los comunes a cuestiones muy concretas, como es el caso de la sobrevivencia, que también Aromar nos ha invitado a que pensemos en esos términos, ¿cuál es lo básico para vivir? Y si estamos tratando a esto básico para vivir, a estos recursos básicos para vivir como verdaderos comunes o no. Entonces, el caso por el que usted ha luchado durante tanto tiempo nos parece extremadamente importante. Bienvenido a esta discusión, gobernador, que espero sea una de muchas discusiones, pero también de mucha acción, no solo por el agua, sino por los comunes. Bienvenido.
Muchas gracias Emilia, gracias por invitarnos, y también aprovecho de saludar a todas y todos los que se encuentran en este minuto conectados y siguiendo esta interesante conversación. A propósito de la provocación inicial que estuvo conduciendo Ainara, me puse a pensar y a anotar algunos temas, algunas entradas que tenían que ver con lo común, y a propósito de aquello, a partir desde acá, y a propósito de la necesidad de que hoy día los gobiernos locales y los gobiernos subnacionales garanticen condiciones de bienestar, satisfacción, equidad y sustentabilidad en sus respectivos territorios y comunidades. Creo que lo común es aquello de lo cual depende la vida. O sea, creo que lo común es completamente opuesto a la apropiación. Es decir, la apropiación no tiene nada que ver precisamente con lo común. Y creo que aquí también la primera provocación que quiero hacer dice relación con cómo se levantan desde nuestras comunidades, de nuestros territorios, políticas de reapropiación de aquello que fue común o que es común, pero que hoy día se encuentra en muy pocas manos. Creo que lo común es aquello que debe dar de satisfacción a todos. Lo común está directamente imbricado con lo societario, es decir, la sociedad depende básicamente de los bienes comunes y del acceso a los mismos, porque lo común es aquello que no pertenece a una sola persona. Dicho eso, sin duda que hoy día cuando hablamos de un bien común esencial para la vida, cuando hablamos del agua hoy día, yo creo que lo logré decir en Nueva York en más de algún foro, en más de algún espacio. Durante el siglo XX, los principales conflictos armados que se dieron a nivel planetario tuvieron que ver con la propiedad de los hidrocarburos. Y probablemente la disputa en torno a la propiedad de los hidrocarburos, en particular del petróleo, generó conflictos armados de enorme magnitud y de incalculables consecuencias posteriores, ¿no? Yo diría que hoy día el principal conflicto que enfrentamos no tiene que ver con esta conceptualización de la apropiación de los hidrocarburos, sino que el siglo XXI enfrenta un conflicto de una gran envergadura que tiene que ver con la apropiación de los bienes naturales comunes, y en particular con la apropiación del agua. Y si hago una excepción con respecto a esto, y me imagino que todos podríamos estar de acuerdo, el 90% de la composición de un ser humano al nacer es agua. El 70% de la composición de todos los que estamos aquí presentes es agua. Del agua depende la vida, del agua depende la vida de los vegetales, por ende del agua depende la producción de alimentos, Del agua depende el funcionamiento de los ecosistemas, del agua depende el desarrollo de las economías locales. Por tanto, estamos hablando de un bien común que es esencial para la preservación de la vida, pero para la preservación de todas las vidas, no solamente la vida humana. Y hoy día yo diría que el gran conflicto que tenemos tiene que ver con, básicamente, con cómo transformamos el agua en un factor de renta, es decir, cómo transformamos el agua en un recurso, cómo transformamos el agua en un bien de capital susceptible de ser apropiado por algunos pocos. Dicho eso, hoy día, cuando señalamos toda esta acepción general, la importancia que tiene el agua en términos planetarios, hoy día parece ilógico, completamente ilógico, que, por ejemplo, en países como el nuestro, en países como Chile, y en otros países también de América Latina, hoy día simple y llanamente el agua sea un bien de capital que se transa en los mercados. Un bien de capital que se transa en los mercados y por ende que le genera utilidad o plusvalía a sus tenedores. Yo recuerdo nítidamente cuando me tocó hablar en Nueva York con el relator especial de Naciones Unidas para el derecho humano al agua y saneamiento, me señalaba que hoy día planetariamente son aproximadamente 2.000 millones de personas las que planetariamente tienen serias dificultades para acceder al agua todos los días. Y eso es una realidad y probablemente muchos de los que aquí están y que viven en determinadas comunidades, determinados territorios pueden dar testimonio de aquello. Nosotros lo podemos hacer desde Chile. A propósito que Chile probablemente es un ejemplo planetario unívoco a nivel planetario, es un ejemplo excepcional a nivel planetario en términos de cómo se privatizaron las fuentes de agua y cómo hoy día se encuentra privatizada también la gestión del agua. Las fuentes de agua en Chile se privatizaron en la década de los 80 durante un régimen dictatorial brutal que tomó la decisión precisamente de privatizar bienes naturales comunes que son esenciales para la vida de las personas y que simple y llanamente hoy día le provocan y le producen y le otorgan renta a sus propietarios. Y a renglón seguido, en la década del 90, desde la segunda mitad del 90 en adelante, se privatizó la gestión de las aguas. Hoy día las empresas sanitarias más importantes del país se encuentran en manos de grandes consorcios transnacionales, como el Grupo Suez, por ejemplo, que es dueño de la sanitaria más importante de Chile, Agua Andina, en la región metropolitana, en la capital de Chile, o donde yo me encuentro situado es Val, en la región de Valparaíso, que es de propiedad de Ontario Teacher Pension Plan, es decir, de los profesores de Ontario, Canadá. Hoy día, entonces, tenemos un problema que es bastante concreto, en términos de que hoy día tenemos privatizadas las fuentes de agua, pero también la gestión. Y ahora esto no es solamente propiedad de Chile, sino que también hoy día en América Latina existen países que también tienen privatizada la gestión de las aguas. No así, no tienen privatizadas las fuentes. O sea, por eso digo que el caso chileno es un caso unívoco, porque ha privatizado las fuentes de agua y también la gestión de las aguas. Dicho eso, hoy día, cuando hablamos de este bien común, y aquí está la provocación, ¿cuándo pensamos nosotros entonces, o de qué manera levantamos política pública desde nuestras comunidades, desde nuestros territorios, pensando en la reapropiación de aquello que nos fue común y que hoy día se encuentra privatizado? ¿O de qué manera hoy día quienes estamos al frente de gobiernos subnacionales o gobiernos locales damos condiciones de satisfacción a nuestras comunidades precisamente reapropiando aquello que fue común y que hoy día no es común? Por tanto, creo que este es un tremendo desafío. Y es un tremendo desafío también porque tiene que ver con derechos esenciales hoy día. Creo que esto también lo pude decir en Nueva York. Hoy día América Latina es la región más peligrosa del mundo para las y los defensores de los derechos humanos ambientales. Y cuando hablo de derechos humanos ambientales, hablo del derecho a la tierra, hablo del derecho al agua. El último reporte que hay de distintas organizaciones no gubernamentales europeas señalan de que en América Latina han sido asesinados en el último periodo algo así como 250 mujeres y hombres precisamente por la promoción, defensa e el intento de recuperar los bienes naturales comunes, y el 70% de estos asesinatos ocurren en países como Colombia, por ejemplo, en países como México, por ejemplo, en países como Honduras, por ejemplo. Que duda cabe que tenemos un caso emblemático, y lo instalo, el caso de Berta Cáceres, lideresa del pueblo lenca, premio Goldman Prize en la ciudad de San Francisco en abril del 2015, y que en el mes de marzo del 2016, concretamente en la madrugada del 3 de marzo del 2016, es asesinada precisamente por su defensa del agua. Entonces, incluso este debate le podríamos sacar la carga ideológica e ir sencillamente al sentido común, al sentido más elemental, y me imagino que desde el sentido común, del sentido más elemental, todos van a coincidir de que si del agua depende la vida de las personas, el funcionamiento del ecosistema, el desarrollo de las economías locales, la vida de los vegetales y finalmente la preservación de todas las vidas, Por tanto, creo que es fundamental hoy día levantar políticas públicas desde los territorios, desde las comunidades que apunten precisamente a dar o a imbricar esas condiciones de satisfacción directamente versus el acceso a los bienes comunes. Yo quiero también instalar una segunda provocación. A mí me parece que hablar del agua como un recurso también responde precisamente al modelo extractivista que prevalece prácticamente en todo el planeta. Es decir, si seguimos hablando del agua como un recurso, de la tierra como un recurso, le seguimos rindiendo pleitesía a los modelos extractivistas que en nuestros países, particularmente en América Latina, simple y llanamente no solamente han depredado el territorio, no solamente han comprometido la vida de las personas, sino que además han hipotecado todas las vidas. Entonces, creo que la segunda provocación tiene que ver con aquello. La primera provocación tiene que ver con cómo somos capaces precisamente de formular política pública que apunta a la reapropiación de aquello que nos fue común y que hoy día nos es negado. Es fundamental. La segunda provocación tiene que ver con cómo decolonizamos nuestro lenguaje. Disculpen que lo diga en estos términos, pero cómo decolonizamos nuestro lenguaje para terminar con este concepto del agua como un recurso. Tercero, si seguimos considerando el agua como un recurso, vamos a seguir considerando el agua como un bien de capital susceptible de ser transado en las respectivas bolsas de comercio o en los respectivos mercados. Y yo creo que en este sentido me parece fundamental lo que estamos haciendo a través de CGLU, me parece fundamental instalar este debate hoy día, un debate que estuvo invisibilizado por muchísimo tiempo, un debate donde el hecho de la invisibilización del debate permitió durante décadas precisamente la apropiación de los bienes naturales comunes. Hoy día, cuando digo la apropiación de los bienes naturales comunes, digo que hoy día el agua es una mercancía, es un bien de capital que se transa en los mercados y que finalmente no se condice con la necesidad de lo común. Y termino, la última provocación es: yo cuando estuve en Nueva York tuve la posibilidad de estar en la residencia del alcalde de Nueva York y escuchando al alcalde de Nueva York me enteré de que las aguas en Nueva York hoy día están municipalizadas. Es decir, ha habido un proceso de reapropiación de algo que puede transformarse en público y hoy día en muchas capitales del mundo, hoy día las aguas tienen una gestión pública. Y esa gestión pública le permite a las comunidades, por ejemplo, participar de la fijación de tarifas, por ejemplo, participar del plan de inversiones, por ejemplo, participar de la administración de los cuerpos de agua. Entonces la pregunta que habría que hacer hoy día es: ¿la humanidad tiene que caminar hacia lo público? ¿Tiene que existir un modelo de gestión de las aguas municipalizado donde las comunidades, los territorios jueguen un rol relevante en la fijación de tarifas, en los planes de inversión y en la administración de los cuerpos de agua? ¿O es posible hoy día caminar en contrasentido y transformar el agua o seguir transformando el agua en un bien de capital que le genera utilidades a transnacionales tan poderosas como Suez o a Ontario Teacher Pension Plan o al grupo Marubeni, etcétera, etcétera? Y lo quiero dejar hasta ahí. Yo creo que ahí hay tres provocaciones que me parece que son importantes y que son importantes desde lo común y de sentar en este debate la importancia de la reapropiación de aquello que hoy día, siendo común, nos ha sido negado porque ha sido apropiado precisamente por un puñado de pocas personas.
Muchísimas gracias, gobernador. También un aplauso sentido de todos nosotros porque creo que nos ha ayudado a enmarcar también este debate con respecto a las responsabilidades de los gobiernos locales, una parte muy importante de la que ya Aromar nos había introducido. Y que nos ayuda a darle forma a nuestro debate conceptual, que es muy importante para la transformación. Ahora pasamos a un segmento un poquillo más concreto, de contribuciones concretas sobre puntos de partida vitales, instrumentos importantes para hacer, para materializar la transformación de lo que comprendemos como comunes y de dónde lo situamos en la política. Y comienzo rápido, porque yo sé, Pilar, que te tienes que ir, con Pilar Díaz, que es no solo alcaldesa de Esplugues y está en campaña, y le agradezco muchísimo que esté con nosotros porque las elecciones están ahí a la vuelta de la esquina. Go Pilar, Pilar for President. Además, Pilar es parte de la Diputación de Barcelona, vicepresidenta, y realmente es un gusto tenerte porque entiendo que vas a compartir como contribución la importancia de la igualdad como herramienta también, ¿no?, para trabajar los comunes. Pilar, a ti la palabra.
Pues muchísimas gracias. Estoy encantadísima, es un placer. Me han dicho que es posible que... Sí, tenemos para compartir, fantástico, que es lo que necesitaba justo en este momento. Pues muy buenas tardes a todos y a todas. Emilia, el resto de personas que participáis, es como siempre un grandísimo honor para la institución que represento, la Diputación de Barcelona, poder participar en este intercambio y prospectiva que dinamiza nuestra Organización Mundial de Ciudades y Gobiernos Locales Unidos. Y como comentabais en la apertura, a las personas que me han precedido, esta sesión del ciclo de ejercicios de visión de futuro está dedicada a la recuperación de los bienes comunes, que es una agenda fundamental, puesto que hablar de los bienes comunes es hablar de la vida en nuestras ciudades, en nuestros pueblos, en nuestros municipios y de situar a las personas en el centro de las políticas públicas. Y en este marco, la contribución que queremos compartir desde la Diputación de Barcelona tiene por objetivo constatar la importancia de la agenda feminista y de los cuidados en la reflexión sobre precisamente los bienes comunes. Y en ese sentido, nuestro mundo, no es que yo ahora descubra nada, que lo sabemos perfectamente, pero nuestro mundo se encuentra envuelto en diversas crisis superpuestas que son de carácter universal, algunas de carácter un poquito a lo mejor más local o más territorial, que ellas además están todas interconectadas. De hecho, si miramos un siglo atrás, nos daremos cuenta que no es que pase nada nuevo, pero estas cosas pasaban y evolucionaban de manera más lenta y pasaban en décadas diferentes. Ahora, pues todo concurre justamente en el mismo punto temporal y además, vuelvo a decir, con la globalización, pues está todo como muy interconectado y nos sitúan ante un escenario sin precedentes que representa una importante llamada de atención para transformar nuestros sistemas y nuestros modos de vida. En concreto, empezando la pandemia COVID-19, que ha centrado su foco en las personas y en las relaciones sociales que a lo mejor no valorábamos tantos y que nos hemos dado cuenta cómo de importantes son, y por tanto en la vida también de nuestras comunidades. Ha servido para evidenciar muchos de los problemas y carencias de nuestras sociedades, pero también para poner a los gobiernos locales y a la sociedad civil en el centro de la gobernanza. En su momento ya dimos las primeras respuestas, siempre esos planes de choque que llegan primero, y en este momento, al igual que la pandemia de la COVID ha evidenciado esa importancia que tienen los cuidados, que son un elemento esencial para la vida, también hay que recordar que está ejercido de forma mayoritaria por las mujeres. Pese a los avances conseguidos por los movimientos feministas, seguimos constatando que los derechos de las mujeres siguen amenazados a nivel global. O sea que las victorias no se acaban de consolidar, que a veces damos dos pasos adelante, pero acabamos dando un paso atrás. Y por tanto no hay que fiarse que a veces también los populismos que envuelven Europa, el mundo, el planeta, hace que nos replanteemos que todo aquello que ya dábamos por hecho, pues hay que continuar lucharlo. Y por este motivo estoy convencida de la importancia de generar y fortalecer alianzas internacionales, de hacer aflorar el poder del municipalismo feminista y del valor de la cooperación descentralizada como una grandísima oportunidad para favorecer el intercambio de experiencias, para estudiar estrategias diversas, para hacer frente a los nuevos retos del escenario internacional y también para decidir acciones de incidencia compartidas a favor de la igualdad de género. Y no quiero alargarme, pero es muy importante que entendamos entre todos y todas que este planeta y que nuestro futuro y la prosperidad de las personas tienen que ir de la mano de construir un mundo entre hombres y mujeres, mujeres y hombres, porque los populismos intentan hacer ver o traducir nuestras palabras en que queremos sustituir los hombres por las mujeres. Niego la mayor, lo que queremos es construir en igualdad un mundo muchísimo mejor para todos y todas y que además las decisiones las tomemos las mujeres y los hombres y las mujeres. La agenda feminista y la agenda de cuidados debe entenderse como una agenda transversal del Pacto para el Futuro. Para mí, el principal conector que debería guiar todas nuestras acciones es el cuidado de las personas. Cuidar, recuperar, reconstruir. Y añadiría un poquito más, reencontrarse, reflexionar, escuchar. Trabajar con nuestras comunidades para identificar las estrategias de crecimiento endógeno y también para saber catalizar esos procesos emergentes que surgen en cada uno de nuestros territorios, que a veces son muy similares, pero a veces también son como muy diversos. Pero lo importante, intentar tejer territorios verdaderamente resilientes y sin dejarnos absolutamente a nadie atrás. Considerando que todas las personas requieren cuidados a lo largo de toda la vida, a veces nos puede parecer que no, pero también los hemos necesitado, a veces los necesitamos en este momento y los llegaremos a necesitar y esperemos que así sea, y además de forma más intensa en determinadas etapas del ciclo vital, como es lógico, La provisión de cuidados es un grandísimo reto para las políticas públicas y un elemento central de las agendas locales que debe reflejar la implementación de nuestro pacto para el futuro. Y a la vez la igualdad es el único camino posible para alcanzar el reconocimiento efectivo de los derechos de las mujeres y la diversidad. La desconexión del mercado laboral, la falta de oportunidades de promoción y el incremento de las cargas domésticas y familiares pues no auguran un buen presagio para las mujeres del mundo y a consecuencia de todo esto pues vemos muchas veces tambalear su seguridad económica, por no nombrar otro tipo de seguridad, y se aumenta también la diferencia respecto al poder adquisitivo de los hombres aún más y se producen pues esas brechas que en este caso pueden ser brechas salariales, pero son las digitales, son en muchos ámbitos de la vida misma. Bueno, yo creo que no debemos permitir que esto pase de ninguna de las maneras y vamos a reconstruir nuestras comunidades con esa mentalidad femenina en la que tanto los hombres como las mujeres, tanto los niños como las niñas tengan oportunidades reales y tengan igualdad de oportunidades. Dicho eso, y tomando en consideración nuestra agenda en común, me gustaría también reivindicar los compromisos específicos que contiene esta agenda para centrarse en las mujeres y las niñas, como son, por ejemplo, el compromiso de derogar las leyes que entrañan discriminación de género, como es promover la paridad de género, incluso mediante cupos y medidas especiales, nosotros aquí muchas veces le decimos discriminación positiva, o también erradicar la violencia contra las mujeres y las niñas, incluso mediante un plan de respuesta de emergencia. Pues bien, el género, junto a otros ejes de opresión, es todavía hoy, desgraciadamente, un elemento central de las estructuras y las relaciones sociales, económicas y políticas, y por este motivo, más allá de estos compromisos específicos que contiene nuestra agenda en común, es la agenda en su conjunto la que debe impulsar una agenda feminista y de los cuidados. Y ya me gustaría finalmente aprovechar esta contribución para destacar el papel de la innovación social, que es imprescindible para abordar desde las políticas públicas los cambios sociales cada vez más acelerados, profundos y complejos, de forma más colaborativa y transformadora. Igualmente, también el abordaje de estos retos implica necesariamente la aplicación de un enfoque interseccional en el desarrollo de las políticas locales, si queremos realmente incidir en los distintos ejes de desigualdad, así como en las necesidades, demandas, aspiraciones y derechos de la ciudadanía y poder avanzar hacia municipios con mayor equidad y sostenibilidad social. Desde la Diputación de Barcelona creemos en estos espacios, en el Pacto para el Futuro de la Humanidad, en el trabajo de CGLU y en cualquier plataforma que nos permita acumular, avanzar colectivamente hacia el objetivo compartido que tenemos, ese de no dejar a nadie atrás y a ningún territorio atrás. Y por este motivo, ahora ya que son las últimas palabras, las aprovecho para lanzar la pregunta para el debate del Ágora, y es: ¿cómo debemos avanzar para que la agenda de género y de los cuidados se convierta realmente en la agenda compartida de nuestro movimiento municipalista? Pues bien, eso es lo que queríamos compartir con todos y todas vosotras. Muchísimas gracias por la atención. Deseo un debate pues muy rico y muy estimulante para el conjunto de todas las sesiones. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Pilar. Well, as you know, Pilar, this debate that we are having today needs to help us shape this unpacking and actual implementation of the pact at local level, but also in the work plan of the World Organization. And it also needs to help us define the priorities of the policy councils. You are a policy councillor of UCLG. You are now actually already narrowing where you want our discussions to go. So I'm very grateful. That question that you are asking for the Agora is not an easy one to respond, but luckily we will have more time than this discussion to start responding. But I think there is a very clear link between the question that you are asking and the identification of the mechanisms and the essential tools that we will need to use as movement to actually put commons in a different space. And what does putting commons in a different space of the agenda? It actually means going to a caring society, right? If you go to a caring society where cities care and where the main role of humans is not production, but actually being a creative being and taking care of each other, then we are starting to really change the way that we relate also to the planet and the way that we need to govern ourselves. You see, the different interventions are really linking up well with each other. The type of policies that we will need to support to make them happen is a different story. But I am very happy that today we have with us Gabriela Cuevas, and Gabriela is the chair of the advisory panel for universal health coverage, which from our perspective has been a very, very important partner to help us put health and care in a different space of our agenda, to redefine what health entails and to also change the perception of our partners about the role that local and regional governments play in shaping the health agenda. Health is much more than health care, but certainly universal health coverage needs to be in a different space if we want no one and no place to be left behind. So I would like to start with you for this next contribution, Gabriela. Gabriela has also been a parliamentarian in Mexico, so knows very well how hard it is to change legal frameworks. But hopefully we will be succeeding little by little in every single step that we take to change the space for health, also an issue that we haven't mentioned yet in this discussion, but that I think is also very, very essential. Gabriela, un gusto tenerte con nosotros. Adelante.
Muchísimas gracias por la invitación, Emilia. Me da muchísimo gusto estar con ustedes en esta conversación. No solo ahora, estando en estos temas tan importantes de cobertura universal de salud, sino también como ex parlamentaria y alguna vez en mi vida, hace muchos años, autoridad local. Así que me siento como en casa. Muchas gracias por la invitación. I will continue in English as my presentation, as you can see, is in that language. So I think it will be easier for everyone to follow up between the presentation and my comments. We believe that the first step when we are talking about commons is to place people at the center of all decisions. So for us at UHC 2030, it is about guaranteeing the right to health for all through universal health coverage. What it means that all people have access to quality healthcare services they need without facing financial hardship. What it involves: the right to health anchored in national laws and regulations with comprehensive essential health benefits package, national health plans, and whole of society approach. What it takes: government spending prioritizing investment in primary healthcare as the most effective way to bring affordable, good quality healthcare to communities. Here, I will really like to underline this concept. Health is an investment, not a cost. And usually when we're speaking with governments, for a lot of them, health is being seen as a cost. But if we are truly sincere, health is an investment, and perhaps the most important one, because it is an investment in our own people, in their very basic human right to health. So it has to be included with the contributions to wider social and economic progress. Without health, we cannot even imagine to be able to fulfill other SDGs. And here, another important concept is that benefits are going beyond health, which are critical for a healthier, fairer, and more sustainable world. How does universal health coverage link with the commitments of the Pact of the Future? In terms of people, fostering universal and equitable access to health services and protection against financial hardship. If we see the numbers during the pandemic, it is very clear that we cannot continue with a planet where half of the population is completely discriminated from the healthcare services. Second, promoting, restoring, and maintaining the health and well-being with a focus on people instead of diseases. Ensuring empowerment of people to have a say in decisions about their health and ensuring that policies and programs are responsive to their needs and reach their full impact. And of course, providing a basis to promote gender equality, for example, through sexual and reproductive health rights. In terms of the planet, providing essential health services accessible to all with the least amount of travel through primary healthcare facilities and community engagement, and empowering people and their communities to play a central role in protecting the environment through greater awareness of health promotion and prevention. And in terms of government, contributing to local government legitimacy, transparency, and accountability through primary healthcare delivered by hand with communities. Here, and I'm sure that you will understand this concept perfectly, if we're able to really strengthen and provide good primary healthcare, then we are going to be more successful in terms of prevention, in terms of cost effectiveness, and of course, in terms of working hand by hand with the people that you are representing and governing. Fostering social and civic participation through involvement of communities in decision-making, and promoting feminist leadership by increasing the representation of women in health decision-making processes. To be clear on this, I think that data is very eloquent. Women were 70% of the health workforce during the pandemic, but when it comes to decision-making processes, we are only 25% of those people that are deciding about health. So it is clearly an underrepresentation. It is, of course, not democratic, and it is not fair. Then how does universal health coverage link with the commitments of the common agenda? First, leaving no one behind, ensuring that national health policy frameworks address the health needs of vulnerable and disadvantaged groups, which are more often being left behind. Removing the barriers of various types of discrimination through progressive universalism. We were talking about how, for example, legislations or policies are discriminating women. Well, women and girls are being discriminating almost, I think, every minute in the world in our health systems because of cultural barriers or budget concerns. But we have to ensure that we are leaving no one behind, that we have a truly inclusive health system. Protecting our planet, improving community resilience to climate change by protecting people from threats to public health, including climate change, and promoting peace and preventing conflict, ensuring that societies can strive and strengthening social cohesion and justice with healthy people and communities, as well as greater equity within and across countries. Our questions for our discussion: how to ensure that governments commit to a renewed social contract anchored in human rights and secure buy-in from people for the redistribution of public resources and trust in effective public spending. What is needed to ensure that local governments in particular consider health as the most important investment for their local constituencies. And finally, I would like to add, Emilia knows this process very well, but we are going to have a very important discussion and hopefully an important declaration about universal health coverage at the United Nations. Yes, the high-level meeting is going to happen in September, but we have to work, I think, faster and more intensively all this year to be fully prepared for that high-level meeting. We had a very important declaration on 2019. We are working on the implementation process, but I am absolutely sure that cities and local governments can build that bridge that is very much needed between those international commitments, those global amazing discussions, to realities, to a very transformative process that could be able to transform people's lives. So thank you very much, Emilia, for this conversation. We are very happy to participate with you and all the cities and local governments that are represented here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. I think you have done a great job in making the case for the priorities of our members to shift ourselves as well, and on making the connection between the commons and health. Health is a common, and the thing is that we are not treating it as such. We are focusing a lot on diseases indeed. And your question for the Agora is very relevant to me, because although we have been having health in our agendas, it has always been from a public health perspective around pandemics and not around universal health coverage, not as part of the caring agenda. I think we are reaching a point now where that shift can be made. Renewed responsibilities can be given to local governments, but also renewed investment, which is an investment in ourselves, in our survival. The next case that we want to bring, the next contribution, is also around this, also dealing with the food system, for instance. Food systems, we have our special envoy on food systems with us, Mayor Sefiani from Chef Chawen in Morocco. The current food system is not actually meant to feed people. It is a much more complex system that has not as only objective to feed people, but actually to make profit, right? And mayors around the world, our local and regional government membership, have been looking at this issue for a very long time, while acknowledging that their competencies around this topic are limited. The way that it impacts populations and the communities they serve is so relevant that it's unavoidable to make it part of our agenda. So I'm very grateful. Merci, Monsieur le Maire, d'être là avec nous pour ce sujet assez important pour nous, pour notre agenda en général, mais particulièrement aussi pour cette thématique spécifique. Monsieur le Maire, c'est à vous la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Emilia, chère amie, chers collègues. Tout d'abord, je te remercie pour avoir programmé cet exercice très innovant, très important, et une étape importante dans l'implémentation de notre pacte pour le futur. Donc, le sujet du système alimentaire est un vrai sujet maintenant d'actualité que nous pensions qui était plus à remettre en question. Mais le contexte actuel et surtout le contexte mondial montre que cette question est loin d'être résolue. Tout d'abord, ce contexte-là, on ne peut pas ignorer l'impact de des guerres, et notamment la guerre en Ukraine, sur le système alimentaire mondial, qui impacte le système alimentaire nationaux et même locaux. Et ça, nous le vivons jour le jour. Et au niveau des villes, on reçoit plus de demandes d'aide, de la spéculation au niveau des prix des aliments, et puis aussi des pays qui se considèrent des pays producteurs en produits agricoles, qui deviennent, eux, des grands importateurs des produits agricoles. Et là, c'est une véritable transformation et ça donne vraiment un souci en termes de sécurité alimentaire. Deuxièmement, tout ce qui impacte des changements climatiques, et là, les sécheresses aiguës que vivent plusieurs pays dans le monde, les inondations, de tout ce qui impacte la désertification, la déforestation, tout ce qui est phénomène et catastrophes naturelles et qui impacte le processus d'agriculture et de production d'aliments dans le monde. Et on le vit maintenant, et c'est l'occasion de parler de ce nouveau concept de perte et dommages qui était une des résolutions de la dernière COP de Sharm el-Sheikh en Égypte, la COP 27, et notamment le système alimentaire doit bénéficier bien sûr de ces pertes et dommages, et notamment pour le Global Sud. Là, on voit beaucoup de populations qui avaient une insuffisance alimentaire. Et avec ces changements, ces changements climatiques et des catastrophes naturelles, on commence ils se translatent vers des populations qui ont une insuffisance grave alimentaire. Il y a aussi le rôle des villes à jouer et surtout cette connexion urbain-rural qui est très, très importante et comment valoriser ce lien-là pour avoir une certaine souveraineté alimentaire au niveau local et au niveau provincial et bien sûr cette économie circulaire qui pourrait aider à une meilleure production d'une alimentation qui est saine. Il y a aussi la pandémie que nous avions eue et tout le monde a vu qu'un problème d'accessibilité, un problème de mobilité inter-country, inter-pays, inter-région et même inter-ville dans une certaine étape de confinement aigu. Et là, je crois qu'il est important de revoir les politiques publiques liées à la production au niveau local, liées aussi à la consommation, à la rationalisation de la consommation, liées à la souveraineté locale en termes d'alimentation. Et si on parle d'un point de vue plus global, on voit aussi qu'il y a une surconsommation dans un certain nombre de pays, en particulier les pays du Nord, une sous-consommation aussi qu'il faudrait rééquilibrer, qui est dans les pays du Sud, et je mentionne l'Afrique comme exemple, et bien sûr, tout ça doit être revu, ce sont des questions pour un meilleur accès équitable aux populations des différentes villes, des différents countries. Il y a aussi un aspect aussi important qui est la spéculation foncière au niveau de nos villes et la nécessité de revoir le mode de planification urbaine et de l'aménagement des territoires et de passer d'un système en horizontal qui consomme beaucoup de terres viables et qui pourrait produire, bien sûr, assurer une production durable et soutenable de produits alimentaires à des villes plus compactes et plus verticales et qui pourront encourager et promouvoir l'agriculture urbaine et même penser à l'instar des ratios des espaces verts dans les villes, on parle de 10 mètres carrés, de 12 mètres carrés par habitant, des ratios aussi en termes d'agriculture urbaine, qu'est-ce que les villes ils produisent comme produits alimentaires dans les villes et pour repenser ces indicateurs-là pour mieux motiver une alimentation saine et durable au niveau des villes. Et là, bien sûr, je terminerai par le volet finance qui est très, très important et l'accès à la finance et notamment au niveau des villes pour les aspects liés à l'alimentation comme un des créneaux liés, bien sûr, au changement climatique, aussi aux migrations. Tout ça me mène à dire que l'alimentation saine, nous devons avoir le droit à cette alimentation saine. Un concept de soin en amont de la gestion des biens alimentaires. L'alimentation doit devenir un droit qui ne dépend pas des fluctuations des marchés ou de capacité d'achat des personnes ou de guerres contextuelles. L'alimentation doit devenir un droit humain, comme l'eau, qui assure la santé physique et mentale des personnes et qui doit être au cœur des accords politiques multiniveaux et multilatéraux. Il y a aussi, et là je passerai à l'autre slide, nous donne la possibilité de quel type d'engagement on pourra prendre et c'est nécessaire de les prendre. Je donnerai comme exemple, il faudrait, à mon sens, se concentrer sur le développement humain en mettant l'accent sur la culture, la paix, la créativité et la qualité de la vie, promouvoir des systèmes alimentaires durables et inclusifs, gérés et améliorés par toutes les sphères du gouvernement, favorisant l'accès et la qualité de l'alimentation, la sécurité, la souveraineté, la nationale et aussi locale alimentaire, et ainsi la résilience, et aussi un nouveau contrat social ancré dans les droits humains. La transformation des systèmes alimentaires aux fins de la durabilité, de la nutrition et de l'équité, renforcer les institutions publiques pour améliorer la protection de nos biens communs mondiaux et la fourniture des biens publics dans l'alimentation, et renforcer les finances locales, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, et repenser l'architecture fiscale afin de garantir des flux de revenus sûrs pour améliorer la planification et les investissements au niveau local. Ceci, bien sûr, me mènerait à poser une question avec trois composantes. Quel modèle de développement local, national, mondial doit-on dessiner pour générer une répartition équitable des biens communs liés à l'alimentation, une planification des territoires adaptés et non soumise à la spéculation, et quel type d'indicateurs doit-on disposer? Et enfin, quelle politique publique, nationale et locale, répondant à l'urgence climatique ou la question des pertes et dommages soit au cœur des solutions politiques et financières. Voilà, avec ça, je termine mon intervention et je vous remercie encore une fois.
Merci, merci bien. Des questions très importantes. Je pense qu'on ne va pas pouvoir adresser avec profondité les questions là, mais ce sont des questions très, très importantes pour notre agenda commun dans le cadre des conseils politiques, effectivement. Merci pour cette intervention, Monsieur le maire. Je voudrais savoir si André Viola, lui, il est déjà parti, je pense, parce que je ne le vois pas. C'est dommage parce qu'il était avec nous et il voulait faire un point aussi sur la question de l'eau. En tout cas, son proposition dans notre chat, c'est noté. Allow me then to go to the next segment. To our InFocus segment. As you know, these discussions are not only discussions with the organized civil society and with our membership, but also with important partners. And this year we are promoting a small number of high impact partnerships, and I am very happy to say that the United Nations Population Fund is one of those institutions that we feel will make a difference in the way that we are looking at the agenda. And before I give you the floor, Arthur Erken, Director of Policy and Strategy of the United Nations Population Fund, I want to congratulate you for this spectacular report on the state of the world population, and for the way that you are also trying to address some of the false narrative that we need to face as world, where we all feel, look, we are too many, and because we are too many, we are impacting the way we live in the wrong way. So I have really come to appreciate some of that false narrative that you are addressing in that report, and how much we need to celebrate that in a period of over 20 years, we have been able to improve the life expectancy in 9 years. Of course, we want much more of this. And in fact, some of our members with the governor of Antioquia in Colombia heading this movement would also like to see the life expectancy increase everywhere much more, because there are many differences in life expectancy. The life expectancy overall is better, but is not what it should be everywhere. And we think the way that we look at population, at reproductive rights, the rights of women and girls, and the way we look at how we are populating the planet will be very critical for us as well to shape the future and our contributions to the summit for the future. So I celebrate you are with us, Arthur. Congratulations again for that report, and I invite you now to trigger our imaginations about what the role of local and regional governments can be in that discussion around population, how to manage it, and how to ensure that we celebrate that we are more and should be able to all survive in this planet. The floor is yours, dear Arthur.
Thank you so much, Emilia, for that very nice introduction. Really, it's a pleasure for us to be here and to be associated with this event, but also to be associated with UCLG, because it's really an important partner for us. So the United Nations Population Fund is really set up more than 50 years ago to help governments dealing with population issues. And as you rightly said, we just published our annual State of World Population Report, which was really around a milestone that we have achieved as humanity. In November of last year, we passed the 8 billion mark. So we are 8 billion strong, if you will. And the report is about 8 billion possibilities that we have. But interestingly enough, the reactions to that milestone was rather mixed, I would say. It wasn't a celebration of humanity. It wasn't a celebration of we've overcome a lot of obstacles and look, we are living longer and children survive their first 5 years more than we've ever done in the past. It was much more around we have too many people, or we have actually increasingly too few people. Interestingly enough, for the first time, there were voices saying, well, we're really getting too few people. And I will say why that is, because the world's population is really reordering very rapidly. You have now pockets of high population growth, but you have increasingly countries and areas with low fertility and aging and rapidly aging societies. So there are those who are saying we have still too many. Those are saying we're getting slowly too few people, and that created a lot of what we call demographic anxiety. And we see that more and more in the world is anxiety around population. Just a few facts, and I hope I can contribute to this discussion, this very rich already discussion with you all. But it's important to understand 2/3 of the world's population today, 2/3 of the world's population today lives in countries that are below replacement level fertility. And replacement level fertility, as we call it in the United Nations, is 2 children on average per woman. If it's more, you have growth. If it is below 2, it does mean that the woman does not replace herself and her partner, and therefore there's decline. So most of us now live in low fertility countries, below replacement level fertility. But that said, and this is of course a paradox, why this discussion about too few and too many is so interesting, the world's population will still increase from 8 to 9 and probably even to 10 by the end of the century. So by the middle of the century, we'll probably have already 9 billion people. And by the end of the century, most of us will probably not be there, but we'll have 10 billion people. That's almost a given. Because in demography, you can really predict a lot of things, because those that will get children in the future have already been born. So you can already more or less predict that that's going to happen. And this will have tremendous implications for you dealing with cities and local governments. Because another important phenomena, and that you know very well of, but we deal with, of course, on a daily basis, is that already half of the world's population, half of those 8 billion, so 4 billion, live in urban centers. And by 2050, it will be 70%. So we have 9 billion people, more than 9 billion people in the world. By that time, 70% of those live in urban centers. Increasingly, by the way, in high density cities, shaping countries and communities like never before, socially, culturally, economically, etc. And this is interesting for humanity because it's actually a rather recent phenomenon, this living in urban centers. If you look at humanity's history, the fact that we're now having already half of us living in urban centers, and it will be 70% very soon, is really recent, and it will have, of course, a direct impact on the discussion today that you have on the commons and the abilities of cities to create safe, accessible, affordable, and livable conditions for people to thrive. Interestingly enough, and some of you have already alluded to it, of course, this happens. So this declining fertility, increasing populations, and most of them in urban centers, actually happens at the same time when we have a lot of global megatrends happening and converging at the same time. Particularly, of course, rapid climate change, growing inequality among people and between countries and within countries, a record number of people on the move, both within countries, but also, of course, among countries, geopolitical tensions and changes. And of course, growing humanitarian crises, both in terms of numbers of crises, but also in terms of length. We see more and more that protracted humanitarian crisis. Interestingly enough for you, most of the mega cities, as you know, are actually in coastal areas that will be most affected by climate change. And what we'll probably see is that these cities will be affected and might change the size of the cities. And we'll see probably other cities that are probably now provincial towns really becoming really megapolis cities, because that's where people will go because of climate change. Urbanization will probably even more increase, and they will probably go to different cities than they probably do today. So the issue of the comments, Emilia and colleagues, resonates very well with, of course, the mission of UNFPA, the United Nations Population Fund, which is, our mission is to deliver a world where every pregnancy is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. And that was a promise that was not made up by us. That was a promise that was made by the international community almost 3 decades ago, in 1994, during the International Conference on Population Development in Cairo, which we're going to celebrate next year. And I hope we're going to celebrate it with a lot of you, to really think through what 3 decades of thinking about population, and particularly thinking about a human-centered and particularly a women-centered development, is going to look like. Now, why is this mission so important? Do you know that half of all the pregnancies happening in the world are unintended? Do you know that 250 million women today are not in a position to control their bodies and their fertility? Do you know that 800 women die every single day in childbirth? That is, every 2 minutes a woman dies while giving life. So today when we go to bed, another 800 women have not survived their pregnancy in the world. Do you know that 12 million girls are forced into marriage before the age of 18? That is 33,000 girls every single day, whose futures have been ripped from them because they were forced into marriage, and most of them, of course, forced into getting children, etc. So delivering on our promise, the promise that I mentioned, will transform truly the lives of women and girls, and will be the drivers for sustainable development. Without that, without gender equality and the empowerment of women and delivering on this promise, it will not happen. Now, and here's where your mission and our mission really converge. Cities are, of course, the engines for social change and transformation, the transformation we are also after. And of course, they're also the engines for economic prosperity, and therefore plays a critical role in this mission as services to women to thrive, for their ability to control their own bodies and have bodily autonomy, for their economic and civic participation, are all part and parcel of city life and of your mission and your thinking around how do we do this. Now, with urbanization, of course, increasing and continue to increase, as I just outlined, well into the future, the pressure on the commons will only increase. So if it's already a problem today, it will be an even more challenge, of course, tomorrow. So the task is well carved out for you and for all of us. So we, of course, as UNFPA, we stand ready to really work with you to think this through. It will not be easy. We have more questions than we have answers. And we saw a lot of questions, but I think we have challenges to answer those. And that's okay, because it is difficult and it is complex and it goes rapidly, these social transformations that are happening. But we stand ready to work with you to see how we can best achieve that. Because frankly, the way we see it, we have no other option but to succeed in that mission, because our well-being and truly our survival as human species really depends on it. So I hope, Emilia, I give some food for thought around the scope that you're dealing with, that is really driven by population growth, even though that picture is very diverse. Over to you, Emilia.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. I certainly think it's a very timely contribution to our discussion. It's a very timely partnership as well. The changing the narrative around how many we are is very, very important, because we also need to take those statistics into account, right? A lot of the people that come to this earth come in conditions that we wish they were not like they are. They are put in very vulnerable positions, and that has to do with the role that women have in our societies in general, how vulnerable the rights are, no matter how hard we have fought for them. And this is also why I think mechanisms like feminism are so important to be put at the center of the agenda, where care is also a very important articulator, and when acknowledging the reality around demographics and population is also very, very relevant. We are not too many. We are too many in certain places. We are not too many in other places. And certainly it is the conditions of who we are, where we are, the ones that we need to change. And for that, the system needs to change because it's broken. It's not working. So thank you for this very inspirational talk. It will really feed into our discussions, and we're going now to a different phase of this exercise. We're going to the Agora, so it's open floor. And before opening the floor and giving the facilitator's role to my dear colleague Lorena Zárate, I want to quickly let you see a material that we are developing where we are collecting all the thoughts that are being discussed here, and that it will be made available for all of you. It's a mural. It has the shape of a Ludo. You will recognize this game. All the roads lead to the Pact for the Future in this Ludo. And you will see that when you take away one of these colors, you will recognize they have already been taking notes. You will see the different parts of the discussions that we are having. We will go back to it following the Agora, but so that you know that none of the thoughts that we have been sharing here today will go lost, and that they will be part of our future programming architecture. So if it sounds abstract what we are discussing, don't worry. We are making a true effort to make it as concrete as possible. Lorena Zárate, back to you, and we will go back to our mural after the Agora, and our colleagues will present to you what the outcomes are. Lorena has been a very important partner for us with different hats, Lorena, as part of our town halls, of course, with the platform for the right for the city, in your role as president of HIC, of Human Habitat International Coalition in the past. The platform has been a critical partner to help us shape the content of the town hall, not only our agenda around the right to the city. We have been working together on that throughout the Habitat 3 process and the SDGs. But now we consider you as part of our decision making in this renewed governing structure that we are trying to create through the future envisioning exercises, where our policy councils and the town halls meet into what we hope will be a structural, articulated discussion, not only for opinion and exchange, but for actual decision-making around priorities. So I'm very happy that you are with us today to kick off the discussion at the Agora, and of course to bring your views and where you see our conversation going. Lorena, I know your connection is not stable, so if there is any problem, you let me know, and I am sure we will find colleagues that we will help out. Lorena, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias, Emilia. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todas y todos. Voy a hablar en español. Entiendo que hay traducción y que todo el mundo puede seguir la conversación. Muchísimas gracias por esta invitación. Es para nosotros una gran alegría, un honor y, por supuesto, una gran responsabilidad poder seguir colaborando en este proceso, una colaboración que iniciamos hace muchos años y que desde el año pasado en concreto hemos enfocado en el tema de los comunes y cómo avanzar en una estrategia compartida entre sociedad civil y gobiernos locales en la protección, en la defensa y en la realización de los comunes. El debate de hoy ha sido realmente fascinante, con muchísimos elementos y muchas preguntas muy importantes sobre la mesa. Empezamos ya parte de este debate en el proceso del año pasado, durante los cabildos públicos o las town halls, y también en el retiro de GLU en febrero de este año, donde adelantamos algún ejercicio. Creo que hoy hemos ido mucho más a fondo y confío que podemos seguir este tipo de diálogos y de debates en los meses que van a venir. En particular me gustaría destacar tres puntos, tres cuestiones que creo que nos pueden ayudar a pensar un poco la estrategia de cómo seguimos, ¿no? Resaltando cosas que han sido dichas. El primero, me parece que es la cuestión de la propia definición de los comunes como cosas, los comunes como procesos, como relaciones sociales, y en esto creo que todas las intervenciones han sido muy claras de la necesidad de vincular los comunes con el enfoque de derechos humanos en general y con el derecho a la ciudad en particular, ¿no? Los comunes desde el ámbito local y territorial, la vinculación con las comunidades locales, la vinculación con los gobiernos locales. Me parece que aquí tenemos que seguir trabajando juntas en ampliar la noción de los comunes. Vimos las dificultades que hay todavía de Naciones Unidas para plantear una visión reducida, ¿no?, de los comunes, limitados solo a los comunes globales, sin pensar en la escala local, sin pensar en el involucramiento de los gobiernos locales y las comunidades locales, sin pensar en cómo incorporar otras dimensiones de la vida cotidiana que fueron nombradas aquí, ¿no? Y hablamos, por supuesto, de salud, hablamos de alimentación, hablamos de vivienda, hablamos de agua, hablamos de los cuidados y de tantas otras cosas que deben entrar en la lista. Entonces, trabajar juntas para ampliar el sentido y construir no solo una narrativa compartida, sino un nuevo sentido común alrededor de los comunes. Y esto también fue mencionado hoy. El segundo, que es sobre los cómo, ¿no? Y ahí la acción de cómo avanzar se relaciona muy, muy crucialmente con la gobernanza de los comunes. Y vamos a gobernar y a gestionar estos nuevos comunes que son a la vez globales y locales, ¿no? Entonces aquí se habló de, por ejemplo, colaboraciones público-públicas, ¿no? Modelos de gestión público-públicos para el tema del agua, por ejemplo. Hablamos, cuando pensamos en los comunes, de fortalecer también la participación, la gestión público-comunitaria. Y nos parece que esto es central para ampliar los comunes y para ampliar la gestión pública de los comunes, que no puede caer solo en manos de gobiernos, ¿no?, de gobiernos locales. Y por supuesto, la necesidad de articulación multinivel, ¿no? Una gobernanza que necesariamente tiene que ser multinivel o multiesfera, desde lo local hasta lo global, y para eso hay que repensar los mecanismos de gobernanza. Y me parece que todavía no hay suficiente energía ni pensamiento colectivo puesto en esto. Dos palabras claves, creo, en términos de gobernanza. Una es la inercia, y los esquemas que estamos habituados y el miedo, ¿no?, a cambiar cosas, y por lo tanto la otra es la innovación, la necesidad de innovación, experimentación en modelos de gobernanza y de gestión, y ahí creo que el nivel local es clave para esto, ¿no? Y el último punto que también fue mencionado, creo, y lo hablamos durante el retiro, sabemos que esto que estamos proponiendo, que estamos discutiendo y que ya se está haciendo en muchos sitios, genera, por supuesto, reacciones y resistencias. Y esto, incluso en la forma de criminalización directa, las experiencias de las iniciativas de los comunes, sean en manos de sociedad civil, defensores de derechos humanos, como se mencionó recién, de los bienes comunes ambientales, pero también de gobiernos locales que quieren avanzar en estos modelos de gestión, ¿no?, y que son obstaculizados o sancionados por gobiernos nacionales y en muchos casos por instancias supranacionales o regionales incluso, ¿no? Entonces creo que tenemos que redoblar los esfuerzos en alianzas y articulaciones multiactor, multinivel, para ver cómo vamos a desarrollar estrategias que puedan prever esto y proteger no solo los comunes, sino a quienes están trabajando para defenderlos, ¿no? Esas son algunas de las cuestiones que me parece que salieron hoy. Por supuesto, hay muchas más y muchas preguntas muy importantes que quedaron sobre la mesa. debido a que mi conexión no es muy buena, muy estable hoy, le voy a pedir a mi colega Sofía Torres, también del equipo de la plataforma y con quien hemos estado trabajando juntas en facilitar el proceso del cabildo del Town Hall sobre los comunes, que por favor me ayude a moderar esta sesión que sigue con el Ágora y algunas intervenciones de colegas que van a aportar en ese sentido. Muchas gracias nuevamente y seguimos trabajando juntas.
Thank you very much, Lorena, for the thoughts and for making the effort to participate, even though with the problems of connections. And thanks to UCLG colleagues for putting forward this dialogue and also making the effort of really continuing through the town hall process of making also this process truly participative. And as it's being said, a co-creation instance as well. With no further ado, the idea is that with the remaining minutes, we can also have an open discussion where other people that haven't had the opportunity to speak can add in as well. The panelists have given us food for thought and some provocative questions as well, but we also have some general questions regarding also helping define what could be these new essentials that are part of the commons, or also regarding key spaces and processes that can feed into this discussion, but also looking at how this discussion from the local level can contribute to a discussion at the international level on the governance of the international system to ensure that the multilateralism of the future enables the success of this shared strategy. So if you want to add into some of those questions, you can raise your hand and we'll do our best to let everyone speak with the remaining time. We'll start then with the first person that was interested in speaking, who is Janit Rueda Ramos, the coordinator of planning, cultural planning of Ciudad de Mexico. Janite.
Hola, ¿escuchan bien?
Sí.
¿Sí? Bueno, agradecemos evidentemente pues la oportunidad de poder participar en este espacio donde pues han planteado cuestiones bastante interesantes en materia de la protección de los bienes comunes. Y en el caso particular de la Ciudad de México, el interés que teníamos de poder pues participar ahora es un poco narrarles lo que hemos estado trabajando a lo largo de más de 20 años. Cuando nosotros empezamos pues a leer un poco los materiales que CGLU ha estado trabajando en este tema, nos dábamos cuenta que hay prácticas y algunas situaciones, ¿no?, que habíamos vivido desde hace muchos años y que pues era importante poderlas compartir de alguna manera para pues poder confirmar que las cosas valen la pena y que pues hay acciones que hemos implementado en las diferentes ciudades o en los diferentes países y que están funcionando. Creo algo importante que previo a poder plantear estas estrategias, pues debemos conocer un poco la radiografía, ¿no?, de la ciudad que está en este momento pues hablando. No solo para señalar quiénes somos, sino que para que podamos hacer comparativos, ¿no?, de cómo se trabaja en una ciudad con un territorio chiquitito, pero que de alguna manera está conformada por 16 pequeñas ciudades. La Ciudad de México es una ciudad conformada por 16 alcaldías, cada una pues elegida de manera democrática, y tiene pues una población de 9 millones de personas que habitan en esta ciudad. Esos 9 millones lo comparten con otros 5 millones de personas más que se mueven diariamente en esta capital, ya sea por cuestiones de turismo, por cuestiones de visita, ¿no?, por cuestiones de trabajo, por cuestiones de estudio. Entonces estamos hablando que tenemos una población alrededor de 12 millones de la que tenemos que atender. Y lo que queremos compartir ahora es este trabajo desde el sector cultural que hemos pues quizás realizado para pues poder atender una población de esa magnitud. También hablar de esta ciudad es hablar de migración. Evidentemente tenemos pues muchísimas poblaciones y comunidades que viven en en esta ciudad, no solamente indígenas, sino de muchos países, y tenemos una diversidad lingüística. Se hablan 58 lenguas indígenas de las 68 que tiene todo nuestro país, y pues evidentemente es una diversidad y un multiculturalismo con el que tenemos nosotros que convivir diariamente. Y en ese sentido es que pues se ha planteado desde hace 23 años aproximadamente, políticas públicas vinculadas completamente a la cuestión comunitaria. En esta ciudad nace por primera vez en el 97 un Instituto de Cultura, donde lo primero que visualiza esa persona es hacer la política cultural a partir de las comunidades. Y a partir de ahí se empieza a trabajar en las periferias de la ciudad y nacen programas muy valiosos que después ustedes pueden pues conocer también en la base de datos de CGLU. Uno de ellos, y el más representativo, que se ha mantenido por más de 20 años, son las fábricas de artes y oficios. Y bueno, estas fábricas nacen en esas periferias con toda la intención de una conceptualización de las comunidades para poder trabajar no solamente el tema de la cultura en las periferias, sino para poder tener acceso a la educación, a los bienes y servicios sociales, a la salud, ¿no? Y sobre todo hay un trabajo muy fuerte en materia de convivencia. Si algo nosotros hemos confirmado a lo largo de estos años, y que creo que es algo que se tiene que poner sobre la mesa después de una pandemia que vivimos todos, es el tema pues de las emociones, de la salud emocional y el tema de las afectividades. Creo que son dos elementos que debemos conocer, debemos trabajar, debemos mirar, porque nos hemos dado cuenta que si no hay afecto entre las personas, por muy bien estructuradas que estén las políticas públicas, por muy bien hechos que estén los programas de gobierno, las propuestas de las comunidades o de la iniciativa privada, a veces los resultados no son los más viables. Cuando se construyen afectos y se trabaja en la salud mental, evidentemente los resultados son muchos mejores. Y hemos pues reconocido, ¿no?, que hay otros bienes comunes que quizás en su momento tendríamos que discutir, como los saberes generacionales que se van perdiendo, ¿no? Poco a poco, y que creo que es importante empezar a hablar sobre ellos. Los lugares simbólicos de las personas, hablamos de los parques, hablamos de territorios públicos en las pequeñas comunidades y localidades donde la gente se apropia y de alguna manera vive en esos pequeñísimos espacios públicos. Hay una foto, ya igual y no me da tiempo, se las compartiré por el chat, que quería yo compartirles. Ha habido muchos cuestionamientos en esta administración de los grandes masivos que se han tenido en la principal plancha pública de la ciudad, que es el Zócalo capitalino, un lugar de patrimonio, ¿no?, de patrimonio de la humanidad, un lugar donde hay una representación no solamente de la cultura prehispánica, sino también una representación importante de la cultura pues española, de la cultura moderna y urbana. Esa fotografía que les compartiré es el ejemplo vivo de una apropiación sólida de la comunidad después de una pandemia donde se logró pues juntar y convivir a más de 280,000 personas en un mismo espacio, donde lo que era importante en ese espacio era la convivencia y poder disfrutar, recrearse y sobre todo salir de casa para volver a activar los espacios públicos de otra manera. Entonces, creo que eso es algo que también tenemos que empezar a cuestionarnos, y el tema de la movilidad territorial. Tenemos políticas públicas desde el Estado que se han construido para la movilidad local, no solamente en transporte público y demás, sino hablamos de la movilidad a pie, de esa movilidad que diariamente las personas, ¿no?, desde salir de casa tienen que realizar. Hay problemas fuertísimos en México, no solamente en la ciudad, sino en el país. Ustedes saben, desde cuestiones de violencia, feminicidios, cuestiones de desapariciones forzadas y demás, y ha sido todo un tema que tenemos que replantearnos.
Te voy a
Muchas gracias.
de ir concluyendo.
Sí, claro. Y pues bueno, estos son de alguna manera uno de los tantos temas que nosotros queremos plantear en su momento, con toda la intención de poder pues construir futuros posibles. Y algo tenemos la seguridad: lo que el ser humano destruye, hemos comprobado que la cultura lo reconstruye, y entonces creo que hay que hablarlo, ¿no? Muchísimas gracias por el espacio.
Muchas gracias, y también por traer la perspectiva de lo que podrían ser comunes y materiales. Voy a cerrar un poquito ya siguiendo el debate, porque como pueden ver, ya hemos llegado al tiempo final de la sesión, pero nos extenderemos algunos minutos más para poder escuchar algunas otras voces. Y en ese sentido, tenía apuntado acá Bueno, ya tenía apuntada una persona más, pero le pasaré la palabra a Andrea.
Disculpa.
Ay, perdona, a Antonia. Es
No,
que
no
acá...
pasa nada, no era por estar seguro.
No, sí, sí, sí.
Sí,
Perfecto.
no, yo voy a... Hola, hola a
Y
todos.
Antonia, te voy a pedir brevedad.
Sí, voy a ser muy
Muchas
breve.
gracias.
No, solo quería comentar, bueno, primero felicitar a todo el mundo por la... Creo que ha sido una sesión muy interesante. Yo quiero señalar dos aspectos esencialmente. Uno, el tema que ya ha citado Lorena también de la necesidad de este trabajo multiescalar, porque, en fin, también porque me ocupo de regiones, obviamente, pero no solo por eso, sino porque creo que juntos vamos a ser representantes reales del conjunto de territorios, estos territorios que están sufriendo seguridad alimentaria, o sea, ciudades, zonas rurales, ciudades intermedias, los temas de agua, como me hubiera explicado un representante regional, el gobernador de Valparaíso, los temas de salud, que suelen ser una competencia en muchos lugares que son de carácter regional, y también el tema cuidados y desde luego el tema de equilibrio territorial, que bueno, me ha interesado muchísimo la intervención del director del MNUMA, porque creo que de alguna manera entender que el territorio es algo más que los núcleos urbanos, no es que va a solucionar los problemas de la distribución de la humanidad y del crecimiento, pero sí puede a lo mejor matizarlos. Y la segunda cosa que quería comentar es que obviamente, bueno, estamos tratando unos temas, pero creo que hay uno que iría absolutamente global a todo lo que hemos planteado, porque sin ese nunca cambiaremos la sociedad y sobre todo una sociedad que queremos feminista y con igualdad de oportunidades, que desde luego está basado en la educación, que es la prioridad para cambiar el mundo. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Antonia, and sorry for the confusion. And now, to wrap up, two final contributions. First, starting with Mohamed Mbu from UCLG Africa, that had manifested the intention to speak. I don't know, Mohamed, if you can hear us.
Oui. Bonjour tout le monde. Je voudrais rapidement remercier infiniment Emilia pour avoir enclenché ce dialogue extrêmement important pour nous. Je crois que ce qui est important, la COP, vous prenez par exemple la COP 15 sur la biodiversité, je crois qu'il a mentionné d'une manière très claire que nous avons un patrimoine en commun, c'est le patrimoine naturel qui existe. Et je crois que ce patrimoine naturel, c'est un commun de toute l'humanité qu'il y a lieu de le conserver. Et lorsqu'on parle de ce patrimoine, on parle également de cette question de droit au développement. Parce que le droit au développement, c'est une question également fondamentale, parce que ce qui a déréglé le système planétaire actuellement, c'est cette course au développement qui a généré un dysfonctionnement total. Par exemple, vous prenez les changements climatiques actuellement, et en lien avec les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, nous avons un patrimoine en commun, c'est l'atmosphère, et cette atmosphère, elle a été complètement déréglée par des émissions disproportionnées par rapport à l'équilibre planétaire. L'équilibre planétaire actuellement, il est déréglé. Je crois que nous devons tous ensemble œuvrer pour un développement qui prend le découplage entre la pression sur les ressources et la croissance économique. Et je crois que c'est extrêmement important pour qu'on puisse aller au devant. Je voudrais également rappeler, ça a été rappelé également, la semaine de climat que CGI Monde a organisée, c'était extrêmement important et durant laquelle le cycle de l'eau, au fait, le cycle de l'eau qui est extrêmement important a été mis en avant et le droit à l'accès à l'eau, c'est une question fondamentale. Je crois que je voudrais réitérer mes remerciements pour ce dialogue parce que le pacte le pacte de l'avenir, je crois que c'est un parapluie qui permet de structurer davantage tous les agendas que nous avons, que ce soit l'agenda climat, l'agenda diversité, l'agenda de nouvelles urbains et l'agenda également de Sunday. Et je crois que cet engagement des collectivités locales dans ce processus est fondamental. Et je finirai par également que tout ce qui se fait pour moi, sans moi et contre moi. Je crois également que la gouvernance multiniveau doit être la clé également pour qu'on puisse asseoir les bases d'une solidarité dans le processus. Et le multilatéralisme solidaire est fondamental et je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mohamed. And thank you also for showing the interconnection with different commitments and agendas that we are trying to work towards and support from a local level through the Pact for the Future. And to finish this round of contributions, I'm going to pass the mic to Sri Sofian from the Huayru Commission, someone that has been very active also in the town hall process in different fronts, but also regarding the commons as well. Sri, you have the mic.
Thank you very much, Sophia. I just want to highlight or add on, because one of the key question is what are the new essential? And, you know, I appreciate the point highlighted by Pilar about care, and that has also been repeated and supported by Emilia and other speakers, and also the very sobering data that our representative from UNFPA talk about the status of women and girls, where they are, and also the point from Gabrielle, who's bringing up the issue of care. I bring this principle, this point from the perspective of also grassroots women whom Huayru Commission is representing the constituency, and also from our feminist caucus perspective. I think, you know, when we talk about gender equality, the key component there is women empowerment, and that has been repeated by several of our key speakers, and that then link with the feminist policy or the municipal feminist principle that UCLG has been proposing, and that should be a key also essential in terms of how we frame our future policy, what we advocate for. Now, I want to bring back to care, because when we talk about care system, one other commons that I think is very important is social protection. I think I've not really heard about that at this, maybe I missed that, but I have not heard about that. And the social protection that covers the diverse inhabitants in cities, I think, and those who are providing care, many of them are informal, and this is from the perspective of grassroots constituency. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for this opportunity of being a part of this envisioning process and consultation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sri, and thanks to also keep on building the discussion around care and commons, which is an interconnection that is key to this debate, looking at how commons also are essential not only to life, but to the reproduction on life, and that is a direct dialogue to the thematic on care as well. And now to really finalize, I'm going to pass the mic to Otavio de la Varga for some final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up.
Déjalo ahí.
Octavia, I can't hear you. I don't know if it's just me.
I muted myself, sorry. I said that, no, good afternoon, thank you. It's been very inspiring, and many of the contributions made me thought all the time about something that Emilia knows I'm obsessed about it, which is governance. And it's not now, I think, it's not only about thinking the governance of public administrations, but to rethink not the ecosystem of governance, I mean, and this is really, really connected with the commons and all the debates. And the ecosystem of governance for me now goes beyond the institutions. It's about how we handle and we work together, communities, private sector, civil society, and even academia, and also the public governments and different levels, tiers of government. And I think that will be critical. If we want to go hand by hand, the rethinking the ecosystem of governance together with thinking about the commons and the other points of the Pact of the Future, it will be very difficult to achieve our objectives. Just wanted to highlight this point.
Thank you for this, Octavio. And I think it makes me think a lot of Lorena's final points when she was talking about governance and innovation, and how perhaps having this this constructive discussion about governance may allow us also to go beyond and figure out how to go beyond this discussion between the divide of public and private and find what could be a bridging between. So thank you very much. Thanks for everyone for participating. As you know, this is just a first step in the discussion that I know that through the interactive mapping that the UCLG colleagues have done, congratulations for that. It looks fantastic and will be entertained, I think, in completing and looking at that. This discussion will go on. So now I'll pass the mic to Emilia for us to wrap up the session.
Thank you so much, Sofia. Thank you, Lorena, also for this Agora discussion for us. As our Ludo explains, is really the place where everybody comes in a city, in a village, in a territory, and this common space that we are creating. You are rightly saying, Sofia, this is just one step in this conversation that we are having that aims to build critical steps towards policy implementation, policy transformation. And many of the inputs that have come from the Agora are signaling the important links that there are between the different entry points that we are discussing for transformation. So as you know, we are dealing with the commons today. Tomorrow we will be looking at financing. How do we finance equality? And next week we are going to be discussing trust and governance. The reality is that you cannot deal with one without the other. But in order to advance, like in any big problem in mathematics, you need to break it down, to see all the different pieces, to bring the new variables to the discussion. And I think today we have started to do that. So between our Congress in Durban and towards the Yon, we were trying to define where did we need to transform most? What were the big questions that we needed to address as humanity, where local and regional governments had a role to play? And we identified, of course, the commons as one of these big things, but we had to put together 2 years of discussions to actually agree on, okay, what are the commons for us? What are we talking about? How do we articulate them? Now we are at the point of not longer questioning what commons are for us, but how can we put them in a different place of policy making? What does it imply to acknowledge certain issues as commons? And so how is that going to impact what we finance and how we govern ourselves, and how do we deal with that? And so those are the steps that we are undertaking, and we are also coming to terms, you know, for it's clear that culture is the mortar of many of the commons that we have in our societies. It's clear that health needs to play a different role. It is clear that housing has a very important space, food, water, but all of that together is actually care and how we're shaping care. And one of the underlying factors that we will need to promote is the shift towards feminism as the basis for the new type of equality that we are defending, with proximity as well, very much in a central space. And this is, from my perspective, where the reclaiming time and trying to avoid the colonization of time is extremely important, and proximity plays a role not only in time but also in the type of relationships that we have with decision making and with each other. So if you ask me, I can see a true evolution in our discussion, and I can see some of the pieces that will need to be the highlights and the places of investment for our network, for our global network, but also for our local and regional governments, if we want to shift the discussion on how multilateralism is going to be taking decisions, but also how national plans are going to be looking like. And so thank you very much for this very rich discussion. I'm looking around because I don't have you together that often, so I would be very happy to give anyone the floor if there are any other comments that you would like to make. But in the meantime, and still the floor is open, I would like to invite Prachi, that has been working very hard together with other colleagues on this mega mural. She's our mural expert. And Prachi, can you share with us what are some of the key components that we are going to be including in this mural? I really want to encourage everyone to use this mural. We will be sharing the link with you. It's an important mapping exercise for us, but I think it's also for you in our co-creation of content. So Prachi, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Emilia, and thank you everybody for participating and the thought-provoking discussions. So the mural, as you see, it's in the form of a Ludo, and today we are at the green square, and tomorrow we will be with economy and finance in the red part, and then overall, we'll go to trust, and finally we'll conclude with the blue, that is governance architecture. And as you see, the mural we have been very systematically note-taking your comments. So firstly, we go to set the scene let's all enter the green square. So we go to set the screen where we have some facts and challenges which have been extensively researched, which are presented and extensively researched by our UCLG Gold colleagues. Then we have also managed to capture your reactions to the Mentimeter questions, and we have documented that. And also we have the entry points nicely summed up and introduced to us by Aromar Ravi and Valparaiso. And then we also have the case studies, what were the key points from the case studies, and eventually the questions that they raised, also the questions that we had already foreseen. And all your comments have been now categorized by answers into these questions in the Agora. And over the next few days, we would also take the time to systematically map the key takeaways that we want for our overall strategy to the Pact for the Future, which, like all Ludo is concluded, we would go towards the central triangle, that is the Pact for the Future, and all the rays will go to our central triangle, and we would hence, embark one step closer, or arrive one step closer to the Pact for the Future.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prachi. Congratulations for this great work. Colleagues, you can now recognize that that square that is under the green side of the Ludo has all the components of the methodology that we described at the beginning. And also I wanted to share, Fatima was reminding me that we are going to be producing a vision document that will be released next week Also, as part of this exercise, there will be a final session, a fifth session, where we will put the discussion together. So commons, trust, governance, and economy will be discussed together. We really hope that this methodology works for all of you, that it helps us advance in our conversation and make very concrete steps towards the transformation that our membership is demanding. It is a bold transformation. It's not going to be easy. That we will have also a lot of people that will criticize and have doubts about what we can actually do from the local level. But I have seen the local level move mountains, and I cannot expect anything else from this exercise. So thank you once more for envisioning the future with us. I'm looking forward to see many of you tomorrow. A brilliant discussion like the one of today, but on the new type of economy that we need. Thank you, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Bye. Thank you, team.
As key enablers, not only to implement the pact at the local level, but to transform the international power landscape. So a shared vulnerability, a shared opportunity to take risks of trust as key enablers, not only to implement the pact at the local level, but to transform the international power landscape. So a shared vulnerability, a shared opportunity to take risks is one way, as Emilia said, to rebuild those relationships and take down some of those power dynamics.
Question again the basics of economy and finance.
And I think that's the real shift that I've seen in the last 10 years. We didn't have a discourse that was dealing about caring, sharing, solidarity, feminist politics.
There will be no human rights or social justice. There will be no right to the city or democracy without the commons.
We're talking about changing the power of me to the power of we.